Hi, I'm Jake Wells, and I'm the Program Director for the Lower 48 here at Yellow Dog Fly Fishing. And today I'm going to talk about things to pack and tips and tricks for coming out on a trip to the U.S. West. So a major part of fly fishing is obviously the flies. And so now I'm going to cover very generally the flies that are used in the U.S. West, whether it be Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, even the Pacific Northwest. Now, when you book a all-inclusive fly fishing trip, staying at a fly fishing lodge, the guides are going to furnish the flies. And I often recommend, using their flies. Let them pick them out for you. They've been on the water, the day before, the week before, and so they're going to know the exact patterns that are working on the river that you're fishing. And it can just vary so greatly from year to year, month to month, week to week, even day to day. And so one pattern that might have been working last week might not be working on the day that you're on the river. And guides are a very superstitious bunch. They are very particular about their flies because that's like their ammo that's going to catch the fish. They might like their flies really skinny. They might like them fat. They might like them weighted a certain way. When they use their flies, they also know what hook they were tied on. So oftentimes I'll go somewhere and I'll bring my own flies and say, can we use some of these? And they'll kind of look at them funny and say, oh, let's use something in my box. It even happens to me, but I'm not offended by that, just because I want to have confidence in the pattern that I'm using. And so that means using the guide's flies. But I'm very happy to talk about kind of, overall the general categories of flies that your guide is probably going to be using. And I often recommend, learn from your guide, ask them questions. Oh, why are you picking out that fly? Are there any hatches going on right now? What fly is this supposed to represent? Because I think you also want to learn, while you're on your trip and gain that knowledge. But from, let's say, the springtime, April, all the way through the fall, October, these are kind of as a good general selection of the flies that you'll be using out here. A lot of them are to what we call match the hatch, whether it's mayflies, caddis, stoneflies, even terrestrials, so hoppers, beetles, ants, as you get later into the summer months. Also streamer patterns that represent essentially bait fish patterns and other things under the water to kind of trigger a reaction from the trout. But within mayflies, which is one species of insect out here, there's dozens of different patterns and that the guide is going to try and mimic or match, as we say. In the springtime, we often see, smaller mayflies like blue-winged olives, and then we see PMD mayflies or pale morning dun mayflies, which these represent. And then throughout the summer, there's others as well. There's Callibatus mayflies. In the fall, there's mahogany dun mayflies. We could just go on and on and on. And then with each different species of mayfly, we have to mimic the different stages, whether it's the emerger stage, the dun stage, or the cripple stage, the spent stage. And so once again, you can see that we can really get into flies pretty deeply here. But there's mayflies. There's also caddis mayflies, which we usually start to see sometime usually in May, and then later into June as well, and throughout the course of the whole summer. And caddis mayflies, they can range in different colors, from olives, tans, grays, also different sizes, from little micro black caddis flies all the way to larger caddis flies that hatch in the fall, called the October caddis, which is a larger size 12, and everything else in between. And then also Most western rivers have a healthy population of different stoneflies. And so for the stoneflies, we're talking about salmon flies, golden stones, yellow sallies, and a few other stoneflies as well that kind of vary from river to river. And once again, your guide's going to have this knowledge about which flies to use. But these are really fun to fish because they're big. Oftentimes they're made out of foam. They float really high, and oftentimes they entice a really hard strike from a trout. So stonefly patterns are really fun to fish as we get into the summer. And then later into July and August, we then move into terrestrial season. So, the main terrestrials that we're fishing are hopper patterns. And there's dozens of different hopper patterns. Some of them are tied with natural material, some are with foam. But we often fish hopper patterns later into July and throughout the month of August. And then also there's beetles and ants as well. One pattern that I never leave home without is definitely a beetle or an ant. Sometimes if I can't match the hatch or figure out what a trout is taking, oftentimes I'll put a beetle or an ant over top of the trout, and that will work. Another fun way to fish are with streamer patterns. Streamer patterns are, as I mentioned, kind of patterns that essentially represent a small bait fish swimming through the water. As we know, trout can be very territorial, especially in the fall months, as browns are starting to stage and get into their spawning mode. So they don't like other fish coming into their space. So streamers, some are flashy, some are more kind of natural colors. Some are really big, some are really small, some are weighted, some aren't weighted as much. But streamer patterns, it takes a little bit of maybe a more advanced technique to know how to fish streamers. But streamers can also be very productive to certainly catch a bigger trout as well. I've had good streamer days, believe it or not, on very bright sunny days. But I've also had better luck on more kind of cloudy, overcast days. But with streamer patterns, once again, there's dozens and dozens of different streamer patterns. As you can see, this is just a very small assortment of different colors, different sizes. Oftentimes you'll hear guides say, bright day, bright fly, dark day, dark fly. But if you want to kind of move and maybe catch a bigger fish, maybe ask your guide if he can teach you how to fish streamers. So, but once again, the great thing about coming out here is that your guide is going to furnish all the flies. We're happy to kind of provide or give you advice on an assortment, but it's just so hard to really cover everything about flies because it varies river to river, even different sections of one river. And the pattern that, like I said, maybe worked last week might not work this week. But flies are what fly fishing is really all about, and I don't think you can ever have too many flies. To learn more about fly fishing out west, go to our website at yellowdogflyfishing.com.